I think the informal sector in Cameroon involves economic activities that is not registered or regulated or even protected by existing legal and regulating frameworks. They are also known as IPUs, which is informal production units, which are production units with no taxpayer number and which do not keep formal written accounts within the meaning of the OHADA chart of accounts. I think that's what I can
Okay.
say about what an informal sector or an informal production unit are.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Roland. So, Mr. Stanley, anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, he has pretty much summed it up. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, yes, we can hear you perfectly well.
Okay. Mr. Mbonteh has pretty much summed it up what the informal sector in Cameroon is. It's basically just the vast ecosystem of economic activities that are operating partially or fully out of the full scope of formal state regulation. And by formal state regulation, we all know that it refers to taxation, labor protection, administrative registration, and all of that.
Okay.
So it usually includes small traders, transport operators, street vendors, and small-scale manufacturers
Right.
that
Perfect.
most of us know.
Thank you very much for that, for giving some practical examples as well. Alors, Monsieur Djamo, vous pouvez parler en français si vous voulez, hein. D'après vous, c'est what's the informal, c'est quoi le secteur informel?
Alors, merci beaucoup, Monsieur Henri. J'espère que vous me recevez.
Oui, oui, nous vous entendons très bien.
OK, bonjour à tous, bonjour à tous les panélistes et bonjour également à tous les participants. C'est vrai que mes copanélistes ont déjà donné beaucoup d'informations sur la définition du secteur informel. En fait, le travail informel, c'est tout simplement une activité économique qui n'est pas officiellement enregistré et qui échappe, n'est-ce pas, en grande partie aux règles de l'État. Donc, cela veut dire que l'activité n'est pas déclarée, euh, ne paye pas d'impôts et ne bénéficie pas, n'est-ce pas, de protection comme la sécurité sociale ou un contrat de travail formel. Donc, concrètement, dans notre contexte, je pense que c'est la forme du travail la plus répandue d'ailleurs et vous conviendrez avec moi que c'est par exemple une vendeuse de beignets au quartier, un mototaximène ou un petit commerçant, n'est-ce pas, dans les marchés, les commerçants ambulants et ainsi de suite. Et donc, ces personnes-là travaillent tous les jours, qui ont des revenus, mais leur activité n'est pas enregistrée auprès des administrations euh, compétentes, donc généralement, qui ne sont pas généralement couvertes par la couverture santé, retraite, et ainsi de suite. Donc, ce qui caractérise le secteur informel, en fait, ce n'est pas le manque de travail. Plutôt, il contribue fortement à l'économie. Je pense qu'on y reviendra sur la contribution du secteur informel
OK.
à l'économie camerounaise. Donc, je pense que euh, dans ce contexte-là, le secteur informel va, n'est-ce pas, bénéficier va tirer parti de la zone de libre-échange continental africain
OK.
que nous allons
Voilà, nous allons
aborder tout à
revenir,
l'heure.
on va revenir sur le fait de la ZLECA. Vous avez déjà, je pense que vous avez répondu à deux questions déjà, parce que la deuxième question devrait porter, c'est quoi la nature du secteur informel? Mais vous avez déjà cité des exemples. Donc, ce que j'aimerais comprendre, Mr. Roland, like what's stopping informal businesses from registering their activities? What's stopping them from becoming formal businesses?
Well, I think the first blockage or the first hitch is access to finances. Most of the economic activities at the informal level lack access to finances. That is one of the difficulties. They have difficulty sourcing for finances. They also have, talking about finances, we know that since the informal sector in Cameroon employs between 60 to 80% of the working population, they don't have that access to finances, but they are the majority of the working population. And that also has an effect on the financial inclusion or the rate of bancarization in Cameroon. We know that it's just about 10%, that the two of them are linked. They also have difficulties in sourcing for raw materials. Difficulties in sourcing raw materials to be sold. Some of them, with the limited budget or limited finances, they cannot also access a good quantity of raw materials. There is also the aspect of lack of customer base. According to the National Institute of Statistics, 63.7% of actors in the informal sector wait for clients to show up, and promoters seek to make themselves known to clients and adapt customer prospecting marketing strategies. So those are some of the issues or the stumbling blocks why they are still in the informal sector, why they are not formalizing their businesses to move into the formal sector.
Thank you for that, Mr. Roland. So clearly, access to finance is important for businesses to help them to transition and to formalize their activities. Now, Mr. Stanley, it's true that financing is important, but if businesses are not registered, it's difficult for them to access financing because one of the conditions from banks is that they present official registration documents, tax documents, and that they have an account that shows some activity. So given that that's the case, are there other factors that prevent businesses in the informal sector from formalizing their activities?
Other factors, anyways, I would like to reframe what my predecessor just said. I think he touched the point, he hit the nail on the head, because it's a matter of how do I call it? It's a matter of perceived benefit versus cost. Many informal businesses see formalization as a way to increase their exposure to taxes, to expose themselves to administrative pressure, compliance issues, corruption, and all of that. So most of them prefer to operate at a level that they can sustain.
Okay.
And formalizing, we all know that formalizing carries a certain cost. Registering your business, having it recognized and known and all of that, it comes with a cost. And a large majority of the informal sector is composed by people who do not have that kind of capital to inject in formalizing their businesses when they are not sure how the next 3 years are going to be for the business. So most of them prefer to operate at the level that they can sustain. Okay. So I don't, beyond cost, I don't see any other significant reasons why people will not formalize their businesses.
Okay. Thank you very much. So to come back to that question, est-ce que vous voulez ajouter quelque chose, Monsieur Djamo?
Oui, Monsieur Henri, je pense que à part le manque de financement, il y a également le manque d'information qui est également fondamental parce que il y a, n'est-ce pas, les travailleurs du secteur informel qui n'ont pas l'accès à certaines informations cruciales pour se formaliser. Et je prends l'exemple, n'est-ce pas, de la zone des trois frontières, c'est-à-dire la Guinée, le Cameroun et le Gabon. Il y a, n'est-ce pas, des travailleurs qui ont suffisamment de moyens pour se formaliser, mais qui n'ont pas des informations, qui ne sont pas formés, n'est-ce pas, pour, n'est-ce pas, transitionner vers le formel. Je pense que l'information est également très importante à ce niveau-là.
Oui, parce que so what we what we managed to achieve last year at CEPI is we spoke to lots of businesses, and lots of businesses told us that they do want to export, but most of them, for example, didn't know where to go and find the information. So what we did was tell the Chamber of Commerce and the Minister of Commerce. So we found out that those procedures were not even accessible online. If you want to export in Cameroon, there are some procedures on Douane, some procedures in the Ministry of Commerce, but there's nowhere where you have, all the steps from start to finish. So sometimes it's true that the lack of information can also be an impediment to formalization. But I'd like us to now, in terms of the contribution to the economy, I don't know whether any panelist can give us briefly, can tell us briefly how the informal sector contributes to the Cameroonian economy in terms of GDP, in terms of employment. I think we've established that it's about 85 to 90% of workers. But what other economic contributions are there from the informal sector? Anyone, please. Let's make it more conversational. So feel free to share. Anyone?
Can I say something on that?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah. Following the third survey of employment and the formal sector in Cameroon, which was in 2022, the National Institute of Statistics revealed that the informal sector or informal production units in Cameroon are estimated at about 3.4 million. That shows that it's a great employer. It's a sector that employs, like we have said earlier, so many people. It creates job and wealth. So that's one of the contributions. It also indicates that it accounts for about 60% of the country's GDP. We know that they are involved in small processing of agri-food, small petty businesses across the country. So it's creating wealth, providing employment, and of course, contributing to GDP, even though much would have been gotten from this sector if they were formalized.
The contribution to GDP is about 50%. That's what our official statistics say. So it is substantial, right? Because it's everything from transport to agriculture to healthcare, to every single sector is represented informally, to entertainment. But now we are seeing, when it comes to trade, there's an important percentage of our trade that is unreported, that happens across our borders. I think according to estimates from us and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, it's up to 16 to 17 to 20% of all trade is unreported. So what we have now, we know that there are people operating informally, but most of the policies that the government has put in place tends to favor or are directed at formal companies. For example, when the government suspends the import duties on agricultural equipment, on fertilizer, on machinery, it favors mostly established businesses. When the government reduces import duties to zero or suspends the VAT on locally made flour, only companies who are registered and who sell their flour formally are going to benefit from such reforms. And so while those reforms have an effect on the overall economy, on the broader economy, the impact on the informal sector is limited at best. Now, I'd like to know, are there any specific policies that have been put in place to support the informal sector? So Roland went first. Stanley, I don't know whether you want to have a go at that. Are there any specific policies, or maybe Djamo, if you want to, you can also chip in, yeah? Are there any specific policies that we've put in place that are actually directed at the informal sector, other than policies designed to accelerate formalization, right? So the creation of business formalization centers across all 10 regions. Other than that, are there any specific policies that really target the informal sector?
Globally speaking, I can't tell for sure, but
Okay.
I'll talk maybe
Okay.
about the housing financing sector, for example, because
Okay.
I operate in that sector too.
Yes.
The National Housing Bank, for example, because people don't have access, we're talking about the informal sector, and it's a very huge market. They don't have access to financing because they are not legally recognizable. They are not on the map, if I can put it that way. So the housing bank, for example, the policy that they put in place to be able to touch the informal sector is they brought in microfinances. They're trying to create a bridge between housing financing and the informal sector by bringing in the middle microfinances who have a better grip on the informal sector.
Okay.
So the housing bank is going to be financing microfinances who will in turn be financing the informal sector with housing loans.
All right. So
And
yeah.
I think that's a good example because it's something that could be scaled. It could be replicated in other sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I
Yeah.
think also the government created a 200 million billion guarantee fund, right, to help banks lend more to SMEs and businesses. But
That's right.
unfortunately, unfortunately, they signed the partnership with AfCFTA and it was only limited to formal companies. So we are suggesting now that they expand the guarantee fund to eligible microfinance institutions so that they can actually reach a lot more informal sector actors because 60% of credit at the moment goes towards large companies, right? And the minority
That's
that
right.
goes towards SMEs are SMEs that already use commercial banks. So there's an imperative for us to try and pull them towards the formal sector using that means. But I'd like to come to the
That's right.
African, but in relation to the African Continental Free Trade Area, is it how are informal sector businesses impacted by the AfCFTA? Mr. Djamo, can you give us in 1 minute answer? Let's make it a bit more
Hello,
fluid.
hello,
Yeah,
hello, Mr. Kouam.
yes.
I would like to chip in on the previous question. Excuse before Mr. Djamo comes in,
Okay,
as concerns some of the measures or policies that were put in place
absolutely.
to boost the activities of the informal sector. I think in 2023, the government launched a 146 billion safety net project, adaptive social nets and economic inclusion project, which seeks to give assistance to households and small economic operators, which we rightly said, the informal sector, encouraging them into entrepreneurship and income generating activities. I think that's just what I wanted to add to the social safety net project, which is still ongoing. It's also supported by the World Bank and the
Okay.
government of Cameroon.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, I was wondering whether our concern at CEPI is that most of the business-oriented policies that are put in place tend to target the formal sector, right? So our main concern is that, yes, there are social safety net projects and other programs designed to encourage individuals to access specific services, be it finance or economic or social. But I think a lot has to be done to ensure that informal sector can contribute formally. Donc, Monsieur Djamo, est-ce que pouvez-vous nous dire exactement comment est-ce que la SLECA va impacter le secteur informel ou bien comment est-ce qu'elle impacte déjà le secteur informel?
Alors, merci, Michel Henri, pour la question. Avant de répondre à cette question, j'aimerais revenir sur la question précédente sur les mesures mises en place par le gouvernement pour aider le secteur informel à se formaliser. Alors, je pense qu'il y a aussi une initiative qui a été, en fait, une initiative qui a été initiée en 2003, je pense bien, il y a le programme intégré d'appui aux acteurs du secteur informel qui est là pour aider, n'est-ce pas, les travailleurs du secteur informel à se formaliser, qui les accompagne en matière de financement, de formation également. Je pense que le problème à ce niveau, c'est que la plupart de ces travailleurs-là n'ont pas connaissance de ce programme et donc il est très difficile
Pour eux d'y
que
accéder.
ce programme ait un impact, n'est-ce pas, significatif sur les travailleurs du secteur informel. Et à part cela également, je pense qu'il y a la loi de finances de 2025 qui a prévu, n'est-ce pas, la réduction ou alors l'exonération des taxes sur des taxes de 3 ans, je pense bien, sur les nouvelles entreprises créées et donc, cela consiste à les inciter, n'est-ce pas, à se formaliser également. Mais
Absolument.
le problème, c'est que absolument. Le problème à ce niveau, c'est que lorsqu'on adopte une mesure comme celle-là, il faudrait, n'est-ce pas, avoir un suivi, c'est-à-dire que à partir de la mise en œuvre de cette mesure, il faut, n'est-ce pas, avoir n'est-ce pas, je vais dire des rapports qui montrent que les années précédentes, voilà, les entreprises qui se sont formalisées et à partir de la mesure qui a été initiée, quelles sont les entreprises qui se sont formalisées? Est-ce qu'il y a, n'est-ce pas, une balance?
Absolument. Absolument.
Donc, je pense que oui, c'est très important à ce niveau.
Mais est-ce
Euh,
que ça veut dire que cette mesure revient directement au ministère des petites et moyennes entreprises? Parce que le rapport du ministère des petites et moyennes entreprises montre le nombre des entreprises nouvellement créées. Mais ça ne montre pas quelles entreprises opéraient déjà dans le secteur informel. Donc, c'est quelque chose qu'on
Absolument.
pourrait suggérer à M. Kouam. Mais
Tout à fait.
avant de revenir à votre contribution, there's one of the sectors that have benefited enormously from the AfCFTA and that was already and which was already operating effectively is the Cameroon's agriculture sector is very much tied to Nigeria's agro-processing sector, especially in the border towns. So Cameroon exports a lot of eru to Nigeria, as well as fish, right? And as well as petroleum products. But petroleum products is something that's quite formal. But agriculture products like fish, like rice, um, what else? Fish, rice, cassava. We export quite a lot of agricultural products to Nigeria. And a lot of that happens across borders or through the sea, either from Idinao, Limbe to a lesser extent, or through the QC border post. So how can we encourage these informal sector traders who trade across borders daily? Because moving 20 bags of eru, 2 bags of eru from Cameroon to the Nigeria border, I mean it's 30, 45 minutes. How can we encourage them and how can we protect them to ensure that they can continue trading effectively under the African Continental Free Trade Area? Stanley, do you want to go first?
Well, I just wanted to say that that African integration did not begin with treaties and conference rooms and policies. Africans have been trading for centuries without any policy or any treaty binding them. So the treaties came after the trade already began, and it did not take into consideration the African context, the African way of doing business. So I think
I think Mr. Stanley has facing some internet challenges. So what we suggest at the Cameroon Economic Policy Institute is that we implement what is known as a simplified trading regime. A simplified trading regime is already being implemented in East Africa and in ECOWAS. It will mean that anybody who wants to sell or buy goods that are less than $2,000 can do so without having to pass through expensive and burdensome checks. I was wondering whether is this something that can work in Cameroon in Cameroon's case, Roland?
Yes, I think so. Even though, like Stanley Ella mentioned, there is a lot of trade, informal trade going on between Cameroon and its neighbors, especially in agricultural products, like you earlier mentioned. When you look at the borders between Cameroon and Congo, there is a small market there, which holds, I think, weekly. There is a lot of trade transactions between Cameroon and Congo along that border. Fortunately, they are using the same currency, so there's not much big problem in terms of payments. Also with Nigeria, a lot of transactions are being done along the Ekok border, along the Idinao border, and even in the far north region or the northern zone, because we have quite an extensive border between Cameroon and Nigeria, which extends over 2,000 kilometers. So you can imagine the level of informal trade that goes along that corridor. So if we simplify, if we implement the simple trade regime, it's going to give enormous opportunities for Cameroonian informal traders who will not only trade with the neighbors, but might also go to the extent of going beyond. If you give, for example, an opportunity for a Cameroonian trader to cross into Chad and then go to another African country beyond Chad, I think it's going to be very lucrative. Selling products with comparative advantages because I think Cameroon, for example, is endowed with a lot of potentials, especially in agriculture. And if they have that simplified trade regime, it's going to benefit them more, and they will make more money, more revenue, and even the government will have to profit a lot through the small taxes that they will get from the informal traders.
So just to thank you so much for that response, Mr. Roland. Just to add to what you said, we noticed that in East Africa and in ECOWAS, once they implemented a simplified trade regime, government revenues actually increased because fewer people were smuggling goods. So if the government allows people to simply fill out a simplified sheet when they're going from one border to another, it actually creates more of an incentive for informal sector workers and traders to formalize their activities. We've seen it across 2 regions in Africa where it's implemented. So we are strongly calling for policymakers to implement that in Cameroon. Because if you're a trader and your goods cost and you have 2 million worth of goods, 2 million worth of Eru or 2 million worth of 2 million worth of vegetable oil or rice, and they ask you to pay 15% at the border, that immediately eats into your margins. So what we want is a system where we would rather informal sector traders pass, and rather than pay the import duty, they rather pay a customs fee that can be set at a standardized rate so that they know that we can trade openly without having to go through informal means. Now, we've, Mr. Stanley, it's true that Mr. Stanley, you noted that we were trading well before we had this trade agreement, and that's true. But Africa remains the least integrated region in the world. Intra-African trade is only 16% of total trade, right? In Asia, we're at 45%. In North America, we're around 50%. In Europe, we are between 60 to 65%. So although Africa has been trading has been trading since its inception, unfortunately, our region is the least integrated. So I'd like,
right?
Yes, we're talking about intra-African trade in comparison to other regions. So other regions.
Intra-African formal trade, I would like to nuance.
Yes. Intra-African formal trade, but if we add, if we add the informal trade that happens, which can be up to, even if we're generous and say it's up to 25% of the total, that number only goes from 16% to about 23, 24%. And that's overtly optimistic. So even if we're being overtly optimistic, we're not at 30% of intra-African trade. I don't know. Well,
I
if
don't
you have a
think so.
different opinion
How do you put a figure on the informal
on
sector?
informal, so informal trade, there are different methodologies. The methodology that's used by the UN is they go on the border and they record specific types of cars or people working in the transport sector that are moving certain types of goods. So usually they don't stop them to control those goods. They stop them and they do basic controls. But they measure them based on the frequency. They measure them by the tonnage, right? So that's how and over the years we've been measuring that. They measure that periodically, so every year. When they measured that for 5, 6 years, they found out that the amount of informal trade passing through was maybe the amount of informal trade passing through was maybe 15 to 16% of the total. So based on that, that's where that figure comes from. Now, if we claim and some Africans claim that informal trade is a lot more, even if you add 5 percentage points to that figure, it brings intra-African trade to 25%. We will be happy to share some research to that regard. So the bottom line is that we Africans, we don't trade a lot. We don't trade as much as other regions do amongst themselves. So what I would like to understand, what I would like us to maybe discuss is why do Africans find it difficult to trade easily amongst themselves? So I don't know whether you have some
If I
thoughts.
may,
Yes, of course.
if I may, Africans find it difficult to trade amongst themselves simply because there are barriers to trade.
Yeah.
And the barriers to trade are more powerful than the incentives to trade.
So some of these barriers are what, like the customs duties that are imposed?
Customs duties that are imposed, visa restrictions, and all of that. To me, the problem, if we have to look at it from a holistic point of view, is a problem of institutional trust between traders or between the people and governments.
Okay.
That's a problem.
I'm going to
That's a problem that
I would like you
All right.
I would like to come back on the point of visas and institutional trust. So I would like you to maybe help us reflect on why it's taking so long for us to have free travel across the continent and how that impacts trade. But I'd like to Mr. Roland, before I come to you, Mr. Djamo. Mr. Roland, we've spoken, you who is our work focuses a lot on bringing down tariffs, right, for traders. You're well aware. But since we signed the AfCFTA, there are 48 countries that are now state parties. 53 countries, sorry. What is stopping the countries are not yet publishing their tariff schedules? So what is really stopping countries from engaging in the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area? Why is it so slow?
I think it's a matter of political will, protectionism, if I can put it that way. Since the AfCFTA was adopted, it took some time for countries to come on board. Out of the 55 countries, I don't think we have up to that the number today. All the countries are not yet. Some signed the agreement, but they have not yet ratified. I think it's the issue of political will and some sort of protecting their national interests first.
Okay.
Protecting
But
their economy.
It's good that you point that out.
security concern.
It's good that we point that out. Monsieur Djamo, vous avez disparu. Je voulais vous poser une question, Mr. Djamo, parce que the AfCFTA says that countries don't have to reduce tariffs on all of their products, right? Countries have to reduce tariffs on 97% of products. And for developing countries like Cameroon, they have to reduce tariffs on 93% of their products over a 10-year period. And for these developing countries like Somalia and South Sudan, they have 15 years to slowly remove those tariffs. And they have another 7% of products where that are going to be where they're going to remove custom duties at the later date. And there's 3% of products that are excluded from the tariff lines, which means that one country can decide that they want to protect the agricultural sector and keep their tariffs on agricultural imports. Another country might want to protect their mineral sector and maintain their tariffs on cobalt or nickel or tin or aluminium. So the AfCFTA also gives that flexibility. Mais Monsieur Djamo, est-ce que vous pouvez venir nous dire pourquoi est-ce que les pays peinent à vraiment accélérer l'implémentation de la ZLECA? Qu'est-ce qui empêche l'implémentation? Parce que ça fait 7 ans qu'on a signé l'accord de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, mais quelque chose empêche l'implémentation pour les pays. Donc, est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer pourquoi les pays peinent à implémenter cet accord?
Alors, merci, Monsieur Henri. Je pense que le premier obstacle qui empêche l'implémentation de la ZLECAf, c'est le manque de connaissances, n'est-ce pas, sur l'accord même de la ZLECAf.
Okay.
Donc, je prends l'exemple toujours du secteur informel. Dans une étude menée par les Nations Unies dans la zone des 3 frontières, 81% des commerçants enquêtés n'ont pas connaissance, n'est-ce pas, de la ZLECAf. Et donc, si on veut tirer, n'est-ce pas, parti de cette zone de libre-échange continentale africaine, on devrait d'abord la connaître et aussi ne pas seulement la connaître, mais comprendre, n'est-ce pas, les règles du commerce international, parce qu'ils ne savent pas comment exporter, comment importer dans le cadre de la ZLECAf. Il n'y a pas, n'est-ce pas, il n'y a pas comment dire, des règles ou alors une plateforme qui donne toutes les informations sur les procédures d'exportation, les procédures d'importation, qu'est-ce que les règles d'origine, ainsi de suite. Donc, je pense que la première chose à faire pour réussir l'implémentation, c'est d'abord la sensibilisation de tous les acteurs économiques et ensuite la formation également. Donc, il faut former les acteurs et aussi les acteurs vont à leur tour former, n'est-ce pas, les commerçants sur les règles, n'est-ce pas, du commerce international,
Juste,
c'est-à-dire
juste pour
les règles
revenir,
d'origine, les
juste pour
procédures
revenir
d'exportation, et ainsi de suite.
Juste pour revenir à ce que vous dites, Monsieur Jameau, il est vrai que nous devons sensibiliser les entrepreneurs, les travailleurs, les commerçants du secteur informel. D'ailleurs, c'est ce que nous faisons à CEPI. On essaie de former 1000 personnes, 1000 entrepreneurs par an, n'est-ce pas? Ou
Tout à
1300
fait.
par an. Mais malheureusement, il y a ce décalage entre les informations qui sont disponibles et l'implémentation de ces accords sur le terrain. Parce que oui, il y a certains pays qui ont soumis les tarifs douaniers, n'est-ce pas, dans le cadre de la ZLECA. Malheureusement, quand un commerçant part aux frontières, ces tarifs douaniers ne sont pas implémentés. So sometimes the agreement is being implemented but slowly, but you would find that maybe the tariff schedules are being implemented in Douala, but when you go to QC, they're not being implemented at the border. So what can we do to improve that situation? The problem of information asymmetry, Mr. Jamo, what strategies do you suggest to ensure that more informal sector workers have access to the training and the skills they need?
Alors, je pense que la solution, c'est de créer un guichet unique pour les acteurs du secteur informel, par exemple, au niveau des frontières. Comme ça, ces acteurs ont toutes les informations sur la ZLECAf et aussi sur les procédures d'exportation, d'importation et aussi les accompagner, non seulement financièrement, mais aussi dans le cadre de la formation parce qu'ils ne savent pas comment s'opèrent, n'est-ce pas, les échanges au niveau international, les règles qui s'y appliquent, ainsi de suite. Donc, je pense que créer une plateforme, c'est-à-dire un guichet qui regroupe, n'est-ce pas, toutes les institutions Et puis, dans ces conditions, je pense que cela va permettre, n'est-ce pas, aux acteurs du secteur informel de bénéficier des opportunités, n'est-ce pas, qu'offre la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Djamo. Mr. Roland, I know the Cameroon Business Today Award is vital for entrepreneurs, right? Over the years, you guys have financed over, 150 businesses and helped them scale. Some of them are working with CEPI now to certify their products and expand. What should we do to ensure that our informal sector workers, even if they're not exporting directly, they can contribute to this AfCFTA process?
Yeah, thank you very much. Before answering that question, I want to come back to the last question on the stumbling blocks. I think one of the problems too is rules of origin, which demands that products must have a certain standard, meet specific rules, qualified for preferential tariffs. What we can do, Mr. Djamo talked about training. I think our informal sector needs a lot of training and sensitization for them to be able to leverage the advantages of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Like you mentioned a while ago, Cameroon Business Today has been engaging SMEs and startups in our various competitions annually. We are on the 5th edition. And one of the benefits for the participants is coaching. We liaise with some experts who give those startups and SMEs professional guides or give them coaching,
professional advice
on how
from
to go
on
about,
taxes,
on how to go about,
on branding, on business
branding,
development.
marketing, and all the stuff. So I think that is one of the things that Cameroon Business Today has been doing. And we are also, through our pages, encouraging SMEs in Cameroon to take advantage of the African Continental Free Trade. But as we said earlier, they need, first of all, to be trained, to know the standards that are required for their products to get into the international market.
Yep, and thank you for saying that. At our recent event at the Trade and Sustainability Hub at Hilton, during MC14, one of the things that we spoke about, and one of the things that even our international partners are concerned about, is that although African countries and African businesses want to enter international market, usually it's difficult for them to meet up with these standards. And whether it's packaging, whether it's biosafety or product safety, all of these are very, very important for, all of these are vital for our SMEs to adhere to. So, but I would like to come back to the African context, right? I don't know whether Mr. Stanley around or has he disappeared? I was going to ask Mr. Stanley how the free movement of people is impacting intra-African trade. But I don't know whether Mr. Djamo, Mr. Roland, do you want to comment on what's stopping Africa from implementing a free trade area?
I think, like I said earlier, there is the issue of political will at the top. When you take the case of CEMAC, for example, you find out that it is still difficult to have access to the CEMAC passport, which they talked about so many years ago. It's still difficult for citizens in the CEMAC zone to move freely from one country to the other. And that impacts a lot on the trade, because when you look at the trade, intra-CEMAC trade is less than 3%. So those are some of the difficulties that the traders face. Moving from Cameroon to neighboring Equatorial Guinea with the consignment of goods, first of all, you go through a lot of security checkpoints along the highway in Cameroon itself. Secondly, entering into Equatorial Guinea is not easy with the products that you carry along. So
Yeah.
one of the issues is they say that there is free movement, but that is just on paper. It's yet to be effectively implemented. So if we want to boost intra-African trade, we need to clear all the barriers as far as free movement is concerned. Free movement of persons and goods
All right.
is concerned.
Thank you very much for that. So, Mr. Mbonteh just said that we have to ensure that we make it easy for people to move across borders, because when people move across borders, they're able to sell, they're able to connect, they're able to invest more easily. And that's what is going to ensure that the African Continental Free Trade Area becomes a positive development framework for Cameroon and for its neighbors. So I would like us to go, I would like,
And also, don't forget also the aspect of numerous security checks, because
yes,
when you take, for example, traveling from Douala to N'Djamena, from Douala to Garwa to Marwa alone, it has more than 100 security checks, which impedes a smooth movement of traders.
yes.
That is within the country itself.
Yeah, yeah, and that also leads to food spoilage. Remember that 11%, up to 11% of corn is spoiled, right, in transport, and up to 30% of cassava, right? In a few years ago, the World Food Program put it at 45% of cassava and perishable goods can be lost only in transport. And because we don't have sufficiently advanced cold chain logistics networks, it's very, very challenging for farmers and businesses that lose quite a lot of money. But Monsieur Djamo, Monsieur Roland a dit qu'il y a pas mal de postes de sécurité et cela freine le commerce, même dans les pays comme le Cameroun. Est-ce que ces postes transfrontaliers ou bien est-ce que ces postes sécuritaires ne sont pas nécessaires vis-à-vis la crise liée à Boko Haram ou la crise anglophone? Est-ce que c'est une nécessité qui doit être prise en compte dans le commerce national et international?
Alors, je pense que les postes au niveau des frontières sont nécessaires, mais il suffit tout simplement de les adapter, n'est-ce pas, au commerce. Donc, il ne suffit pas tout simplement d'avoir des postes en de très grand nombre, mais juste l'efficacité, n'est-ce pas, de ces postes-là dans le contrôle des marchandises et autres. Et aussi, je pense que il y a aussi le problème de la corruption au niveau des frontières qui empêche l'efficacité, n'est-ce pas, de ces postes de contrôle, quoi qu'ils soient nombreux. Et donc, je pense que c'est tout juste la volonté je vais dire, de les adapter et de faire le travail très bien dans le cadre du commerce. Donc, je pense que il ne suffit pas tout simplement d'avoir des postes en grand nombre, même s'ils sont en petit nombre, ça peut également constituer un levier, n'est-ce pas, pour le commerce au niveau des frontières.
Alors, je veux venir aux recommandations directement. Mr. Roland, have you got some policy recommendations from us for us? And if you can give us that in a few minutes, that would be great, so that we can open up the conversation to our participants, so that we have a real conversation about this. So, Mr. Roland, if you can give us your recommendations, that would be good. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I think, like we said during our discussion, simple trade regime should be implemented. That is, the procedures should be simplified so that informal traders can meet up with the exigencies. There is another aspect of the Pan-African payment and settlement system,
Yes.
which holds great potentials for uplifting the dynamism of Africa's informal economy. I think the Pan-African payment system should be put in place. I also think that the informal sector actors should be trained, and government should facilitate access to their finances so that they can upgrade their businesses and formalize their activities. I think basically those are the few points that I propose for.
Thank you very much, Mr. Roland. Monsieur Djamo, est-ce que vous avez des recommandations? Vous pouvez citer quelques recommandations de nous. Monsieur Roland a parlé du système de paiement intra-africain, le PAPS, le fait que nous devons simplifier, nous devons implémenter un système de commerce simplifié pour les commerçants du secteur informel, mais que nous devons également mettre à disposition des ressources pour favoriser la formalisation de ces entreprises et aussi leur permettre de contribuer ou d'accéder à les chaînes de valeur régionales ou internationales. Alors, est-ce que vous avez des recommandations vis-à-vis du secteur informel et l'implémentation de l'ASLECA?
Oui, je pense que d'abord, comme il a dit, il faut un régime simplifié pour les acteurs du secteur informel. Ensuite, il faut également insister sur la sensibilisation et la formation également, parce que lorsque les acteurs du secteur informel n'ont pas connaissance même de cette zone ou bien de cet accord, il est très difficile pour eux, n'est-ce pas, de tirer parti, de bénéficier, n'est-ce pas, des opportunités qu'offre cet accord-là. Donc,
Ok, je pense que M. Djamo peut-être a des problèmes de connexion. En attendant que M. Djamo ne revienne, I think we at CEPI, we are of course calling and advocating not only for policies that will support the informal sector.
de sensibilisation.
All right. Mr. Djamo, we missed the last part of what you said. Can you repeat it? Vous avez parlé du fait que nous devons former plus des acteurs du secteur informel. Et c'est ce que cette formation ne doit pas juste venir du gouvernement, n'est-ce pas? Ça doit venir du secteur privé, des acteurs non gouvernementaux comme CEPI et d'autres associations et ONG. Votre deuxième recommandation était? So I think Mr. Djamo might be experiencing some internet challenges.